Let's be real, the battlefield has totally changed. It's not just about land, sea, and air anymore. It's everywhere, and it's happening all at once. So how is the US Army planning to win in this crazy new era? Well, the answer is in a new playbook called Army Doctrine Publication 3.0, and it's all about a new way of fighting called Multidomain Operations. Let's break it down.
So, that's the big question, right? This is the fundamental challenge facing pretty much every military strategist today. War isn't just in one place anymore. It's this constant, interconnected fight that's happening on the ground, in the air, at sea, in space, and in cyberspace, all at the same time. The old playbooks, they're basically useless now. So how do you write a new one for a game that has no boundaries?
I mean, just try to picture this. We're not just talking about tanks and soldiers on the ground anymore. It is a seamless, interconnected fight across every domain you can think of. In this new world, there really are no front lines. There are only front networks.
So yeah, this totally new environment, where every single domain is a potential front line, well, that's exactly why the Army needed a radical new way to think about how it fights and how it wins.
And the Army's answer to this complex mess is Army Doctrine Publication 3.0. This is the document that officially rolls out multi-domain operations, or MDO, as the Army's central idea. You can kind of think of it like a new operating system for the entire Army, guiding everything from how they train to how they fight.
All right, so what's actually in this new playbook? Let's dig into the big shift in how the Army thinks about strategy.
In this right here, this slide just lays it all out. The old way of thinking was all about the land battle, and it was built on this big assumption that the US would pretty much own the skies and the seas. The new doctrine, ADP 3.0, starts with a totally different and frankly, more realistic assumption. Every single domain is up for grabs.
So you might be asking, why the big shakeup? Well, this wasn't just some optional software update. Major adversaries have been pouring money into sophisticated tech that's designed specifically to counter US strengths. We're talking about these massive webs of missiles, sensors, and electronic warfare gear called A2/AD systems, all designed to keep US forces far away. Throw in nonstop cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns, and you can see why that old assumption of US dominance just doesn't hold up anymore. A new strategy wasn't just a good idea, it was absolutely essential.
Okay, so we get why they needed a new playbook. But how does this multi-domain operations thing, actually work on the battlefield?
Well, the doctrine breaks it down into 4 big strategic roles that cover everything from peace to all-out war. First is shape, which is all about preventing conflict in the first place by working with allies. Counter is about jumping on crises quickly to stop them from getting worse. Prevail is pretty straightforward, win the fight decisively. And finally, consolidate gains, which is super important. It's about turning that win into a real, lasting peace.
And to pull off those roles, MDO has 4 core principles. This is really the DNA of the whole strategy. It's about being more agile than the other guy. It's about convergence, which is all about hitting the enemy from land, cyber, space, and air all at once to create these impossible problems for them to solve. And it's about having the endurance and depth to stay in the fight and see it all the way through.
So from those big ideas, you get a set of must-do actions for commanders on the ground. First, you have to see the battlefield with total clarity. Know your forces, know their forces. Next, you have to protect your own people, because in this new world, you are always being watched. Then, you have to create advantages, whether it's with information, position, or timing. And finally, you use all of that to hit them with so many dilemmas from so many directions that their whole system just gets overwhelmed. It's literally about getting inside their head and breaking their ability to make a decision.
Okay, this all sounds pretty smart on paper, right? But how do you take these ideas and turn them into actual, power on the battlefield? Let's look at how the Army plans to generate real combat power.
Because that's the end goal of all of this, right? To generate what the military calls combat power. You can think of it as the sum total of every destructive and disruptive tool a unit can use against an enemy at any given moment. It's the ultimate report card.
So how do you cook this up? Well, the doctrine gives us 6 key ingredients called the warfighting functions. These are the absolute building blocks. You've got leadership, movement, intelligence, firepower, protection, and of course, the logistics to keep it all going.
So you take those 6 essential pieces, right? The leadership, the movement, the intel, and with smart planning and great leadership, you start combining and synchronizing them
to create these 5 dynamics. So if the warfighting functions are the ingredients, these are the finished meal. This is how that power actually shows up on the battlefield. It's not just about the stuff you have, it's about your leadership, your information, your mobility, and your ability to survive. This is the punch that the enemy actually feels.
All right, so you've generated this combat power. Now, how do you actually use it to win the fight when things get real?
The doctrine lays out 4 ways to absolutely break an enemy force. You can destroy them, which is the most direct. You can dislocate them, which means forcing them out of a place they need to be. You can isolate them by cutting them off from supplies and help. And finally, disintegrate. That's the knockout blow, where you combine everything to make their whole structure just fall apart.
But here's a super critical point that ADP 3-0 hammers home. Winning the fight is only half the job. A victory means nothing if you can't build a stable peace afterward.
And for that part of the mission, you've got 4 stability mechanisms. These are the things you do after the main fighting is over: compelling people to comply, controlling the area, influencing the population, and supporting a new legitimate government. The main takeaway here is that securing the peace isn't an afterthought. It's built right into the plan from the very beginning.
Okay, so after all of that, why does any of this matter to you if you're not in the Army? Well, because the ideas here are bigger than just the battlefield.
And this quote really gets to the heart of what might be the single most important lesson in this entire doctrine. With all the talk about tech, satellites, and cyber weapons, ADP 3.0 is crystal clear that at the end of the day, it's the people, their guts, their leadership, their ability to adapt, that will always be the thing that decides who wins and who loses.
When you really boil it down, this doctrine isn't just a military manual. It's a playbook for solving incredibly complex problems. It's about getting different teams to work together, trusting people to take initiative, and being resilient enough to operate when everything is uncertain. And look, those are skills that are absolutely golden in any field, whether you're running a business or leading a community project.
And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to think about. When you think about the complex challenges we all face, whether it's in business or technology, or even in our communities, isn't pretty much every victory we're trying to achieve now, in its own way, a multi-domain operation?